some people are weighing themselves at the beginning of the day, at the end of the day, before their gym session, after their gym session, as if your body fat or body composition were to change within that session. And looking at that as an obsessive behavior has really started to shift the mindset from like this just being part of reaching my goals, and like actually that is obsessive and disruptive to your relationship with your body and your relationship with your health. Hi guys, and welcome back to the Thick Thighs Save Lives podcast. I'm Kelsey.
And I'm Rachel.
Hi, Rachel.
Hey, girl. What's happening, girl?
You know, just a Friday. So we record on Fridays. So happy Friday or Tuesday to all of you guys.
Happy Friday or Tuesday.
Yeah.
It's either the best day of the week or the worst.
Yeah. Tuesdays, Mondays, like slightly cooler.
Not my favorite.
Cousin.
It is 85 degrees. Everybody is having their like own version of a heat wave. Some people are like a little toastier than others, but we're having a Massachusetts version of a heat wave. And I just need to say, this is where I live my happiest life. And if one more fucking person says, I'm ready for spooky season, I'm ready for 60 degrees in sweaters, I'm going to punch someone in the face.
You're always so extreme. Is it any surprise that like you constantly talk about working in extremes, because like you very much naturally gravitate towards working in extremes?
Did I mention I'm going to punch someone in their face?
I just started seeing some of the spooky season stuff, and I was like, that's not me. And it's good to know which one you are. You know what I mean? Like, it's good to know which season you're living your happiest life. And if you can't think which one that is, we got to reevaluate, because you can't complain all winter and all summer and all spring and all fall. This is Massachusetts. This is very Massachusetts of us. But honestly, the weather is a number one top. If you live in Massachusetts, you have an interaction with someone, you're talking about the weather. That's how it goes.
110%. Not the weather.
No.
Hey, how's the weather?
How's the weather?
Can you believe this weather?
We're getting a big storm.
Crazy weather's happening.
This is exactly it. This morning I was coming through. So in Massachusetts, there's always a lot of construction that goes on in the summertime too, because in the winter it's, whatever. So we try and fix our roads all summer for them to just break down in the winter. So what happens,
if you don't know about this, plows. That's all you need to know.
We tear it up, potholes, defy gravity. It's a whole thing. So there's a lot of construction going on one of my routes in here, and I was stopped because there was some traffic, and the guy one of the construction workers that came out, he was talking to one of the police officers, and he's like, yeah, it's a hot one out here again today. Got some water in here. Got lots of waters. Hey, come grab some waters out of the truck. And I was literally thinking, and he had them all. He had like a bunch in his hands. And I was like, this is a short interaction. Of course, he's talking about the weather. And I was thinking on Saturday when we went out for our girls' night, you said how much you hated Massachusetts accents. Like,
I did say that.
Loathe that. And you were like, I've worked so hard to hide it, to just...
Well, not only do I like loathe that accent, like when I hear it because you can't hear it in your everyday interactions.
No.
You just walk around and it's completely normal. It's fine. But the times that you'll hear it back is like if you're watching it's like when you're not expecting to hear it. Like you're watching a movie and they're doing Boston accents or Massachusetts accent, and then you're like, oh my God, this is so cringe. Or like when our mayor comes on TV.
Our mayor.
Hey, I'm
Marty Walsh or Charlie Baker.
It's like when you're seeing like
our representative,
like a public figure, and they're on TV and they're like, so here, what we're going to do is we're going to fix the roads. That's what we got to do. It's so hot. It's the summer. You know, we got to fix the road. So just be patient out there. And you're like, oh my God. Oh my God.
But in your
This is not,
interactions, you never notice it.
no, but it's like, if you're seeing something on TV or if you're like listening to something where you're not expecting it to hear it, then you're like, this is so cringe. That's not what I sound like. And that's why I've worked so hard.
Well, that's why it's always a particular, if you have a podcast,
I've worked
and then you
so
really
hard.
try to really hard. And then sometimes, so like I've worked really hard on this, but there has been times where like you listen back into Mira. When I say Mira is one of the ones that like
That's
a lot
mirror for all the other people that aren't.
I've got a lot of messages like post podcast when I'm saying like women when you're looking at yourself in the mirror and people are like, what is she saying?
Rewind it. What is that word? I'm missing looking at myself in the what?
I never noticed it until I had a podcast and people repeated it back to me. And then I was like, I'm so embarrassed.
Well, what you said,
like,
when
I know how
said,
to spell it.
I can spell it. I know what it looks like on paper. See how I said paper? Because I'm working on it and you're not. But that's fine because you like it.
No.
Yes, you do. Because you said, when I said, oh my God, our accents are so cringe. I can't stand them. Like, it's the worst. You said, well, but didn't you hear that study that said we're like the top 2 or something most sexiest accents? And I said, that it's a hard no. There's no way. That's a flawed study. I don't know who these people were that were being polled, but it goes Australian and then that's it. That's it. That's it.
Can we go to the UK after that?
I'm not even that. That's okay. It's a little. It's dependent.
Yeah, I really love the UK one.
No,
like I really
Australia for me.
Yeah, well, there's got to be something after that. And it's certainly not Scottish. No, I'm just kidding. I'm offending people now. I didn't say that I particularly love it with me. What I said is that I think that if you live in different places, if you live out of Massachusetts, and you go and live in different areas, I think that you have a certain appreciation for it when you come back. And I've lived in several different places, and like Florida, New York, like I've been exposed to just like very different accents when you go around there. And I think you just have an appreciation for, number one, the authentic, just straight up vibe that you get from people in Massachusetts.
We just don't have time. We don't have time. It's like direct or nothing because we just don't have any time. It's like
it's true. It's true.
I just got to say it how it is because I got to move on. I got to go.
But it feels very, and maybe this is just because I'm from here, it doesn't feel rude to me. It feels authentic. Like it feels just like you just said what you needed to say and then we can go on with
There wasn't any fluff. Do you hear that, Midwesterners? We just didn't fluff it. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
People that won't even fluff it?
Well, every week on my lives, I ask them different questions, but one of the ones that I hear a lot from the Midwesterners, or like even Southern, is I ask them, what's the word, what's the verbiage, what's the phrases you use when it's time for you to like kick someone out of your house? Like it's time to go. And they always do the like knee slap, welp, I'll let you go.
I'll let you go?
Yeah. Or like it's a very like welp and a knee slap and it's like a whole thing.
Well, you know what we do is, which Mark is literally known for, when the party's over, you just flip the fire pit. When Mark flips the fire pit, it's time to go.
It's a whole thing. Just get up and flip the fire pit. Like, that's not subtle at all.
I mean,
like, well,
subtle like a bomb. I'm not going to slap my knees. I'm going to literally flip this fire over. And like, that's when you know.
That's when you know. Time to go. Party's over.
Party's over. Oh, God, I hate us. Anyways.
I know. But here's the thing. The other thing that was a funny thing that we talked about on our girls' night, you brought to my attention. Does anyone have any, third children? And do you look back at pictures of them growing up? So I'm the last child, and I was unkept. Like, what was happening?
It wasn't unkept. It was more
It
like,
was pretty unkept. We had like a nice outside picture, and I was clearly wearing someone else's shoes that were
well, yeah,
at least 6
mine.
sizes too big, just like wandering
You
around.
could
There
have
was
went to
also
them.
another picture of like me twinning with Rachel, and like I am super excited to be in this like dress that was made the same as hers, and she is like not happy about it.
Here's the thing about the last kid. You you got to just make it. It's up to you. All right, no one's raising you. All right, they already raised the first one and then kind of the second one.
Yeah,
And like there's nothing left over for you. You get what you get and you don't get upset.
figure it out.
You figure it out, you raise yourself. Yes, you're unkept, probably because no one even bothered. You would brush your own hair. You're 2 years old. Like, it's just that it's a vibe of we already wasted it all on the first ones.
It's true.
And it's up to you now. And I
Yeah.
think that there's a resiliency that is built from that cannot be taught. But I
Mm.
also think, yeah, your pictures are going to look a little rough. I mean,
Yeah.
you had a lot of bruises.
A lot of bruises. And my mom was saying it too. And she was like, yeah, just you always had it. And when I showed up for this girls' dinner, I had like a bleeding ankle, like now as an adult. And I was like, well, we just kept that going.
I mean, you'll make it.
You make it. You
You'll be
make it.
fine.
Resilient.
You'll be fine.
Yeah.
That was
I
a
know.
fun time. I would highly suggest anyone who had like our girls' dinner. What we're referring to is just like the sisters and the mom going, and taking some time to just do some no kids,
No kids.
like no husbands, just the girls, and just going out and like having a dinner and some margs and just doing it up and like catching up. Like my mom brought like a bunch of old pictures, so we were looking at like dirty unkept Kelsea with bruises everywhere, and just like some old pictures of my mom in high school.
I liked
And
that. That was super fun.
so important to just like, I don't know. I think just always reconnect with
I
your
think it's
people.
important, like, too, as moms, that you just like share your stories with your kids of like you as a person growing up, as an individual. Like, I just think maybe that's just later when your kids are older, but like, I just think that's so important that like they see you as a human.
Well, it's just the only way that your legacy can continue is if you share your stories, like good, bad, ugly, great, awesome, horrendous. Just like sharing your stories so that your kids can have them and that your legacy can live on. It's just I think it's and yes, you're absolutely right. It's always important for
Not
moms to
just
be
mom.
seen as like a real person, like parents to be seen as like real people that like really had experiences like before you were born, and then even with you of just like they're just not perfect and they're just living their life and they have all these stories that you don't
And
even
that
know
they're
about.
just doing their best. Humans just out here doing their best.
Speaking of doing our
Yeah.
best, this was, I think, I'm really glad that you brought this up for discussion. I definitely wouldn't have touched this if you hadn't brought it as a topic, because I always feel like, oh my God, I'm not a clinician, I'm not a mental health, professional, and I don't have enough to like contribute when it comes to professional advice. But I think that sometimes you just have to be like, hey, just like live this every day. And that is my experience on it. And I don't have anything, you know, maybe professional to say on it other than like there's somebody else living this experience. Like I don't know, maybe it's just going to be validating, but we wanted to talk about health anxiety on today's podcast, and I'm glad that you brought it up, and I'm also glad that you have a little bit more of a professional background on it so that you can speak to that. But I have also something invaluable, which is I have health anxiety, I'm very sure. And it lives with me every single second of every single day. And I think that just like talking that out and recognizing it could help a lot of people to recognize it in themselves.
Yeah, I also think sometimes, I mean, imposter syndrome is always lingering over every person, and definitely people are given microphones. And I think that there is a lot of professionals out there talking about it, and there's definitely, like, if you are in that space, you hear about it a lot. But there's something really valuable to just talk about regular people who have experienced this and who have had a lot of contact with a lot of women and seen it manifest itself in different ways. And I think that that is an invaluable thing that you bring to the conversation. And I just like to just point that out, because sometimes I bring these things up with Rachel and she just feels like, oh my God, I'm not qualified to talk about this. And I'm like, yeah, yeah, I feel like you are. I feel and like I kind of try to like just like skirt around that and being like, so I feel like you are because you have a lot of personal experience with this in different ways that it manifests itself, and in different ways you could offer some helpful advice. Because I used to feel that way some about like some other things when it comes to talking about ADHD, or thinking about different coping mechanisms, and like this not being someone who has worked in a clinical sense with a lot of these things. Some of these coping mechanisms had not presented themselves on a professional level, but have personally presented themselves. And I was like, those feel more valuable to me and that I would like to share. And that just came from personal experience.
Well, every single guest that we've talked to that I've loved the mostest has been like, how I got into this field was blah blah. It was so personal to me. It was a personal problem I was facing in my own life, and I came up with my own solution, and then it ended up working out really great. I wanted to share it with others. So I always feel like it always comes from the best and most truest place when someone's really saying like, I struggle with this and here's what I can offer to the conversation. Maybe I'm not a mental health clinician, but there's certain things that have made this more manageable, and then certain things that have made it so much less manageable and so much more disruptive to my life. And I just want to share what those are for me. So, when it comes to health anxiety,
Well,
what
first I want to talk about anxiety for a
well, that's
second.
what I'm saying. Like,
Oh, okay.
what does like anxiety look like as opposed to like a health anxiety, like generalized anxiety? Like, I know that a lot of diagnosis for anxiety is, I don't know the numbers on this, but it's increased dramatically.
It has increased dramatically.
But there's all different kinds.
But there's all different kinds, and there's different ways that it's going to manifest itself within you. And I think it's important, being a health and fitness podcast, to talk about anxiety, because the people experience so much anxiety, not only around their health, but going into the gym and just finding ways to live a healthier lifestyle and feeling like
Deciding what to
anxiety.
eat.
Exactly. Like, people aren't even realizing that they are having so much anxiety around what to eat, like on a daily basis, and you have to continue eating, and then that manifests itself in different ways, and we'll talk about that. And this is going to be like an ongoing conversation, so don't think like at the end of this, like, boom, I've solved my anxiety. That's actually never going to happen. But that's never going to happen, because we don't solve it, we don't fix these things, but we find different ways to manage it. And that's actually what's the most important part, is different ways to manage it for you. So there are different types of anxiety and panic disorders and generalized anxiety, and that is how it's going to manifest itself within you. So sometimes when we talk about health anxiety, and when we're experiencing anxiety within our bodies, that can feel and look different. So people who have a panic disorder or panic attacks can experience some anxiety around those panic attacks, where it might look like this, right? You might be like, well, I'm afraid of feeling that increased heart rate because I feel like I'm gonna have a heart attack. The shortness of breath, the increased pressure on my chest, I feel like I can't breathe. So there is anxiety manifesting itself around health, where that looks like health anxiety, when you're afraid of what's going to happen to your body when you're experiencing these anxious episodes, right? So like you're thinking about like that one time I had that panic attack and I had a really increased heart rate. I felt like I was gonna have a heart attack and like that. I'm like so nervous. Is that health anxiety? No, that's very different. And the same is with like generalized anxiety. So like sweating, stomach issues, headaches, chronic fatigue, those types of things can also be just like generalized anxiety. Whereas when we start to talk about health anxiety, it's more of a subset of OCD. So it's the obsession around your health, but not only you, the health of people around you, could be the health of your pets, anything that you love, or you're really obsessive about the health of yourself or people around you.
And, I one thing that I just want to point out is like just because you have never experienced any symptoms of anxiety before or OCD or ADHD, it does not mean that these things cannot manifest later in your life or be like come up because of like causes, like outside forces. I remember that I used to feel a lot less anxious before my son was born. I had like a lot of postpartum anxiety that never was really dealt with, and it just continued to manifest in different ways, and then I just found kind of coping mechanisms that some were healthy, some were not healthy. But like there can be, I just want to like just mention that for me at least, there can be a life event where like before you considered yourself like not a very anxious person, not a very excitable person, like you quote unquote what your version of normal is, and then something happened like a timestamp of a life event, and obviously we can look now to these universal things that happened worldwide like a pandemic and stuff, and we see these things are very commonly the timestamp of like that's when people started experiencing a health anxiety or an OCD or these like obsessive behaviors where before they were managed or they weren't even present in their life.
Yeah, 100%. Like I think sometimes it's always stuck in the story we tell ourselves, right? So like sometimes we think like, well, I had never had obsessive compulsive tendencies before, or I never had anxiety before, so I must not now. What's going on? That it can happen with a life event. Something could, change in the environment around you. You could lose someone close to you. And, I know a lot of people who have experienced a death in their family or with someone close to them. It creates this onset of fear and anxiety around, it's almost a doom, an impending doom that happened. So like this became very real. And thinking about, the pandemic and COVID and like a lot of, you know, lingering nervousness around illness became very real for a lot of people during that time. And anxiety rose, and then, obsessive tendencies rose around that. And then all of a sudden, you're thinking about your health all the time. It's all of these intrusive thoughts. And this can look very different in a lot of people. So I don't want to even just think about this as this just like impending doom of death. Like if you are obsessing over your weight, you are obsessed.
That is a health anxiety.
Yes.
Yeah, that
So
you're
like,
just that is like I think that people, if we can just frame it in a way of like some behavior or intrusive thoughts that is disruptive to your general life. If you are obsessing over your weight, if you are obsessing over your workouts, if you're obsessing over your
food.
supplement,
Mhm.
your food, anything that is intrusively being thought about multiple times per day in a disruptive way, that's where we're getting into a behavior that can be considered unhealthy, right? Because like there's definitely a difference between being health conscious and having a health anxiety. Like the difference is the disruptiveness, going out of your way and saying like, I really want to make a great healthy choice for lunch today because like that's going to make me feel great, and I'm really in the mood for, you know, X, Y, or Z, and this is really going to help fuel the rest of my day so that I can have tons of energy. That is not disruptive to your life. Going Being in a position where if you do not have access to that kinds of food, that is going to destroy the rest of your day. And you're going to obsessively think about the fact that you couldn't eat the way that you wanted to, or you're going to obsessively weigh after that and say like, what did this do to me? Or you're going to say, well, I need to work out extra hard now because I have to make up for that. Those are disruptive and intrusive thoughts that's getting towards a health anxiety and being more of a unhealthy behavior.
I love that you brought up the obsessive weighing, because that is one of the things that, like, just from a societal standpoint, we've almost been like okay with being obsessive about that. And it's really disruptive. Like, some people are weighing themselves at the beginning of the day, at the end of the day, before their gym session, after their gym session, as if your body fat or body composition were to change within that session. And looking at that as an obsessive behavior has really started to shift the mindset from like this just being part of reaching my goals, and like actually that is obsessive and disruptive to your relationship with your body and your relationship with your health.
I can say the same thing for, you know, we've had like this whole entire movement now that a whole bunch of other people are on to. I see like TikToks all the time. We're not measuring progress on the scale. I'm like, yeah, where have you been,
We've
sister?
been here. Let's just make that real clear.
Like, who was saying it like 3 years ago? But anyway, I'm glad that more people are on it, because the more this message spreads, the better. But now it's kind of like people need a new place to focus their obsession.
Yeah.
And so it's like, now we're going to spend hours picking apart photos of ourselves, comparison photos, and like zooming in on like areas of our body and being like, is this smaller or is it the same? Did I like, is my body composition changing or is it not? And it's like, I just want to put it out there that like, looking at photos of yourself and comparing photos of yourself can be a, you know, motivator, or it can be something that you feel pride in, whatever. But when you're doing it in an obsessive way or posting to others and saying, do you see a change? And spending hours looking at these things and saying like, you know, I have to change X, Y, or Z because this doesn't seem to be. These are
Zooming in on those specific parts of your body and obsessing over those specific parts,
these are
looking up.
anxious kinds of behaviors. I mean, that is like obsessive, and
How
it is unhealthy.
often during the day are you thinking about your body? How many times per day? And do you feel that that's disruptive to your day? Because like I was talking to Rachel about this before, because she, if you don't mind me saying, yeah, you don't
I
get to
guess
say no. Rachel has a tendency, in my opinion, to gaslight
Clinical
herself.
opinion.
In my clinical opinion, she has a tendency to gaslight herself. And what that means is that she presents something that she feels like is a problem or is disruptive to herself. And then she compares it to the rest of it. Is it enough to be, am I feeling anxious enough to be considered obsessive compulsive? Am I feeling anxious enough for it to be considered anxiety? And it's almost like this, like, well, does it stack up against everyone else's anxiety? And like, how's that compare? And it's like, it doesn't matter how it compares to anyone else. Is it disruptive to you in your life? And only you get to decide that.
Well, when I asked you, like, well, what's the number? Like, what's the number of times? Like, is there like a number where like clinicians start saying, like, okay, this is, in need of a diagnosis, or this is XYZ,
How
or
disruptive.
like, I was like, what's the count? Like, do you keep a count? And because it was like, so this is going to sound a little odd to you, but like this is actually a self-diagnosing kind of thing, because only you actually know how disruptive this is to your life. It's not a number on a scale. It's not like, there's no way to actually measure it other than to ask you, do you feel that this behavior is disrupting your life? Is this disrupting your productivity? Is this disrupting your happiness? Is this disrupting your ability to go through life with the kind of joy that you want? If the answer is yes, then that's enough to be considered a problem and something that you need to address. And it doesn't have to be, that was really, I really think that's going to be eye-opening to a lot of people, because it was really eye-opening to me that I don't need to meet certain standards to be considered a person that needs to take steps in a direction to help myself. It doesn't have to be X, Y, or Z. It just has to be me talking to me and saying, like, wow, yeah, this disrupts my ability to be happy.
Yeah.
The amount that I'm obsessing over the people around me's health and my own health. Like, I think about this too many times a day for me. I don't know if it's too many times a day, quote unquote, in a like a clinical way, but like it's too many times for me where I'm like, I don't want to think about this so much. Then that's enough.
Yeah. And I think that's just helpful to hear for a lot of people, because like we just tend to do that to ourselves, right? We're like, and society does that for us in a way that it gatekeeps all of these, different things. Like, you hear it with depression a lot as well, where people say like, are you really depressed enough? Because it seems like you were laughing at this time, or it seems like you're experiencing joy. And that's other people's perception of your feelings. And that's irrelevant.
Irrelevant.
It's irrelevant to how you feel and how it's affecting your personal life and your day-to-day behavior. So if you have a behavior that is happening daily and is happening too many times, is disruptive to your life, you feel that this is disruptive to your life, it's something that you don't need anyone to come in and say like, this is disruptive enough for me. It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
You're the one
That's
living.
cool, and that's freeing, and also that is like a path to really being responsible for your own self-improvement and your own, ability to heal, is just saying like, I don't need anyone else to validate if this is like, if I'm like anxious enough for them. I don't need validation. I know what I want out of my life, and I know what kinds of things I need to work on, adjusting. And that's really cool, because that puts all of the power in your hands and the ball in your court. And I just always feel better when I'm holding the cards, because it feels like no one is more invested in me than me.
They shouldn't be. And they shouldn't be. You should be the number one person invested in yourself. And so, like, I want to talk about kind of some compulsive behavior a little bit and what that might look like. And it's just like constantly checking on the thing that you are feeling compulsive about. So, like, you're looking for something wrong, and that happens a lot of time when we see pictures, we see videos of ourselves, we're looking in the mirror. Our behavior is to look at something that is wrong with our bodies. It could be something that we're feeling is wrong. It could be like, I'm a little bit sore. What does that mean? Do I have rhabdo? It can go down these like obsessive paths where it really takes on a mind of its own, or it's a snowball effect. It really takes on a lot more than it started with, where you're like, okay, I'm having some headaches. I probably have cancer and I'm going to die tomorrow. It's really this like compulsive behavior where you take just an initial idea and it just snowballs into something else. And then from there, you kind of look for some reassurance seeking. So a lot of times, WebMD is like, If you've ever WebMD'd something, you know exactly what I'm talking about, where like you can be like, my toenail hurts, and it's like you're losing the foot. Like
Gotta go, sweetheart.
it
It's
just
gotta
happened.
go.
Yeah, where like you're looking for that reassurance seeking, and the internet has been, and I say this all the time, the internet has some really great resources, and it has been really helpful for a lot of people, and it has been really detrimental in a lot of ways. And that is with everything. The more that I've like looked into like different, basically everything, if you go in one direction or the other, it's always too much. Like you have to be able to like ride that middle. So the internet can be a great place to find like-minded people. It can be a great place to find some um, validation that you might be looking for, and that you could find people like you, and you could, kind of talk it out. But it can also take on, this echo chamber where if you surround yourself with other people who have these other obsessive tendencies, then it becomes normalized.
That's always, where I always am sidestepping what is an appropriate amount to be invested in something that I think is healthy, quote unquote, like fitness and nutrition, and what point it gets to be too intrusive
Mm.
to I think that people often join macro groups as a way to facilitate a better way of eating. And then all of a sudden, everything they're seeing, every food that they're seeing, like has a number attached to it. And it's
Yes.
like there's calculations going on in their head. And listen, I'm not saying that this is a negative thing. What I'm saying is that that can go in a direction that is an unhealthy, like, relationship with food.
Mhm.
I always have, I always am riding the line between, I was saying this to you earlier, between like action and being and participating in something that I feel like I want to, that is giving me anxiety. And then also like giving myself a break from, I'm already thinking about that 20, 100 million gazillion times a day. So, do I need to be reminded of it via a Facebook group that's sending alerts to my phone about like, okay, I'm in a trauma group for, um, you know, whatever, just surrounding yourself with the thing that is bringing you some of the anxiety. Like if you're having anxiety surrounding nutrition and then you just like overload it with nutrition information all the time, or if you're having like a trauma around, child loss, or you're having a trauma around, really, you can put this on with anything.
Yeah.
It seems like initially a good idea to surround yourself with that because you're searching for like-minded people, validation, whatever, but it definitely can
Connection.
get connection, right? But it definitely can get to a place where it's just because it's coming in as alerts to your phone. You know what I mean? So if you're having a time of peace or joy where you are not experiencing intrusive thoughts surrounding that thing, whatever the trigger, and you're getting alerts to your phone with the trigger, it's very disruptive. So I think like there's a balance with that, and I don't know what it is yet of being around people who can understand the thing you're going through, and then also making an environment in which you can start to heal and
Yes.
not have constant reminders of the triggers and intrusive thoughts that you're really trying hard. And I'm not saying like trying to work against, right? Because we know how that works. Like
Yeah.
we're not trying to block out thoughts, but like letting them come in. What's the phrase I'm supposed to say?
I don't know when you're looking
Remember,
for.
an intrusive thought comes, and what am I supposed to say? You told me.
Oh, oh yeah. Is this helpful or harmful? Is this helpful or productive to my day, or is this harmful?
So then I can categorize it.
Go
Okay,
into directions.
90% of them are harmful. This is not productive. This is an anxiety producing thought that isn't actually, I'm always having these health anxiety thoughts of like something bad is going to happen to someone, someone's going to get sick, someone's going to DIE. And then I don't have anywhere to store them. But if I can compartmentalize them into like, is that thought helpful or harmful to me right now? Is that productive? Is that helping me to say like, hey, I really, do want to make that dermatology appointment?
Exactly.
Okay, that's a helpful thought. Okay, now I'm moving towards a good direction
A
that I want to be.
solution. Yes.
Right. But most of the time, I'm just thinking that and letting it snowball into a giant anxiety inducing episode. And it's like, no, this was not helpful. So you can compartmentalize that into like, no, thank you. No, you're not serving me right now. So off you go.
Exactly. And one of the things I wanted to just kind of like wrap up with this idea was that there is when you categorize things in those two ways, what we're not looking, our expectation isn't that you are going to completely eliminate the anxiety or the behavior that is presenting itself. That's not realistic. It's definitely not realistic at the beginning when you start to acknowledge these things that this is going to completely go away. So I don't want to set you up for false expectations. What you're looking to do is decrease the frequency of that behavior. So when you have something that comes in, or you say like, I am totally obsessing over my weight or parts of my body, or just generalized health or the health of people around me, and you decide that like, this is the frequency of this behavior is disruptive to my life, I'm going to look at decreasing this behavior. So what you look at is just like the number of times throughout the day, if I can just decrease those behaviors. So like you say, like, I'm not going to weigh myself every morning. I'm still going to do it at night, but I'm not going to do it every morning. So you've decreased, if you were someone who did that twice a day, you've decreased the behavior by 50%.
That's
That's
huge.
huge.
Like, that is huge. You've made this is what I'm always stuck on. It's like these things feel small. It's like, well, that's not, that's not where I want to be. But like, if you consider that a 50% improvement, if you were weighing yourself twice a day and now you do it once, if you were counting calories on every single thing you put in your mouth during the day, and you say, for the 2 snacks that I'm going to have, I'm not going to do calories on that.
And it's going to be very uncomfortable at first, and you're going to say, well, I haven't decreased the amount of times that I'm thinking about this, right? And that's completely normal. So like, just because you've switched to weighing yourself at night, or you've not counted your snacks, doesn't mean I'm still constantly thinking about calories. I'm still constantly thinking about my weight. But the more that you decrease the number of times that you do the behavior, the more you're decreasing the anxiety around the behavior, and therefore slowly decreasing the thoughts around it. So like, it's not there are steps. You have to walk down the staircase.
It's a long game.
Yeah,
It's
you
a
have
long
to
game.
start to walk around the stairs, but it's only one more. It's only one more thing and one more time. I listened to this recent it was Will Smith. It was a clip of him talking about building a wall. And you don't think about building a great wall. That's not what you think about. You think about laying one brick, and laying the most perfect brick. He was like talking about laying the most perfect brick anyone's ever laid. But you just think about that one, and then it builds into something great. But we talk about this with health and fitness all the time, about how it's a staircase and we're just taking one step at a time. But we have to really think about, when we're thinking about our behaviors and the number of times we do something throughout the day, that if you just you don't look at going from 100 to a 0. You have to look at going, just decreasing step by step, and just looking at,
1%,
yeah,
1% improvement every day comes out to a 365% improvement at the end of the year. So
right.
1%.
Just a little bit. And we have to start to think about, when we're healing, ourselves and our relationship with our body, with our food, with the amount of anxiety that we're having throughout the day, the number of obsessive behaviors that we have to think about it in that way, that you're not going to just go to like, well, I had obsessive tendencies and now I don't.
Look at me, carefree Karen over here,
Like,
just living my
especially,
life.
like, I found this,
I wish.
especially with people who present symptoms of OCD, is that, like, what we're really looking at is just getting to a place where we can manage this behavior on a daily basis to get to a place where your life is just 1, 2, 3% better. And getting that to over time, that will really, this is a long ass life.
It's a long ass life.
And which direction are you going to go in?
It can be getting, progressively worse every day, or you can be making progressive improvements. And they happen slow and they're hard to notice in both directions.
Mm-hmm.
Some days you wake up and you're like, how did I get this bad?
Yeah.
Like, how did that happen?
Over the last 2 years, I've looked at a lot of studies. People have woken up and be like, how did I get this anxious? Like, I'm just feeling all the time, or like I'm experiencing, double the amount of panic attacks. And they're like, what happened?
Because 1% every day added up over the past 2 years, and now we're here. But like, if you think of that in the opposite way, it's actually really hopeful that you can wake up one day and go, wow, how did I end up here feeling so much better? How did that happen? Because it's those small progressive steps that you don't really notice.
Yeah. So I hope that that's something that you take from this today, that, you can make some of those small incremental changes. And maybe during this podcast, you were able to identify something that is anxiety producing, or maybe obsessive thoughts that you think about throughout the day, and that you would like to work on, that you would like to put some efforts in, that you can just decrease that behavior a little bit, and that's a hopeful thought for you.
I love it. I'm inspired. I'm working on it. It's a work in progress.
1%. 1%. All right, guys, have an amazing week. We love you.